Yo, what's up everybody? It's Drewberry and we got the last card for the Thunderbolt season, and that is Valentina. A 2/3 on reveal, add a random 6 cost card to your hand, give it -2 cost and -3 power, which is essentially what it costs and the amount of power that you're getting out of this card. Now, when we look at Valentina, we have to understand what the 6 cost cards are going to end up looking like when we get them from her effect. So I have a full list of all the 6 cost cards and how they are going to look when Valentina is dropped. And then also I got some deck lists, I got some counters and mechanics for this card to get you guys all prepped if you want to decide to pick this up or not, or as we like to call it, snap or pass. So Valentina, I think she's been moderately hyped. Definitely not the most hyped card of the season, but when it was first announced and everybody saw it, you see cost reduction and you start to go nuts. You start to think this is going to be the most broken card of the month because historically, cost reduction, energy gain, these cards tend to do well. But the more I've thought about this card, my opinion has really started to change, and I think you're really going to see that once you see the list of the 6 cost cards that she can generate. It really kind of influenced my decision here, but let's talk about the spotlight caches first. So you got Blob, a 6/0, and he's going to eat up your deck and consume the power from the deck into that card. Blob used to be really good, but then he got nerfed to have a cap at 15 power. And there's just other big cards that can kind of do his job for him that you don't necessarily need to deck build around. I'm looking at like things like Red Hulk that just recently came out, even though it was slightly nerfed, still a fantastic card and much better option than Blob in my opinion. And then you also got things like Destroyer, even Giganto if you want to go there. Magneto could even be a decent replacement. So I don't think Blob is a very necessary card to have in your collection. I don't even own Blob, to be honest with you. I didn't own Nico from the week before, and I finally got to pick her up. Those are like my 2 biggest misses in this Snap or Pass series, and I paid for it. And now they're back around, and we'll see if I'm going to pick a Blob up here. Then you got Valentina's Spotlight variant, and of course there were the tokens that you could open up. And then you got Null, a classic for Destroy decks, and a very important card for Destroy. So that one is very appetizing, and I highly recommend anyone try to get Null when they can. But I don't know if you would want to use a Spotlight cache on it. We've seen Null pop up in the Spotlight cache weeks very frequently, so you're definitely not missing out on your only opportunity to get that card right now. I'm sure it'll be like next month or the month after, and we'll see him back again. And on top of that, I think using tokens on Null, just 3,000, is actually one of the best token purchases that you can make because he's such a good card and really, you know, helps the archetype out a lot. So anyways, that's the spotlight caches, but let's learn more about Valentina by looking at all the 6 cost cards that she can generate. All right, so there we go. These are all of the 6 cost cards that exist in Marvel Snap as of April 2024. 27 total opportunities for Valentina to pull one of these options. Now, I've broken it up into 2 sections, okay? So the top section is cards that I value as very good in a majority of situations, okay? So pretty much no matter what you got going on, what your opponent's doing, you're probably going to find value out of these cards in either power or potential effect. Now, the bottom tier is situational and risky cards. Now, I'm not saying that these cards are bad, okay? You could pull these and they can still equally be game winning as the top category. But the reason I've divided them here is because these ones are just a little bit more situational. You're kind of going to need the stars to align for a few of them, or happen to be playing the right deck and it's just like, oh, great, that works for me. So a quick example is Null, okay? So Null has 0 power, and then he gets -3 from Valentina's effect. Now you need things to be destroyed. What if you're not playing a destroy list? Now, I don't think you are with Valentina. And if your opponent's not playing a destroy list and there's locations that don't destroy anything, then probably nothing's been destroyed that game, and now you have a 4 -3 in your hand, and you're probably not overly thrilled with it. So it's just a little bit situational, whereas maybe Death's Domain or Altar of Death happen to pop up, and players are just feeding cards into there, and the Null just so happens to get very powerful. Well, that could be literally the best possible pull for Valentina. So it's hard to evaluate this bottom section, and we'll go through them as well. So let's start with the good ones and why I put them there. Starting with Blob, which I think is actually the most questionable one up there, but he goes to -3, but he's going to eat up your deck and get more power. The reason I put him here is I think in most case scenarios, even just typical normal decks, I think you're going to get up to like 8 to 10 power. And that's going to cover you. I think you'd be fine and happy to play a 4/10 blob, and you could play a 2-cost as well on that final turn with blob. So it's pretty good. Dr. Doom is probably one of the better ones. You're going to get the Doom bots. That's exactly what you wanted when you played Dr. Doom anyways. You don't necessarily care about the 5 power on the main body. So it's just a very good Dr. Doom play for very cheap. And then Odin is pretty good too. You might be thinking, well, isn't that situational, Drew? Well, there's like over, I don't even know, like 150 cards in Marvel Snap that have on reveal. So I imagine that your deck is kind of built with on revealed synergies somewhat, and you could probably find value out of playing Odin on top of one of those cards. So I think you're just fine. And actually, Valentina herself, literally play Valentina on turn 2 or turn 3 even, and then you get to play Odin on turn 4 on top of Valentina. You get another 6 cost. You can roll again and try again at another time. So yeah, I think Odin is a very good option. Then you got She-Hulk. Very good. She can go to 0 for 7 power. Scar as well, 0 for 8 power. Orca is actually not too bad, even if you do not get him in his own location. 4 for 8 is actually kind of okay for the Valentina effect, which we don't necessarily love 4/8s. We don't hate them. We just don't love them. And keep in mind, we'll get to it in a second, but these are 6-cost cards. Zabu can even discount these, even if he was relevant again. So that's not a consideration in this scenario. But moving forward, we have Red Hulk. So Red Hulk just got nerfed a little bit. Doesn't really matter. Red Hulk's probably the best one to get out of Valentina's effect, because with just one pass turn or something like that, you're going to get another 4 power. He's going to go from 4/6 to 4/10 very easily. However, it depends on when you actually generate Red Hulk. That's when he's going to read and recognize when a turn is passed with unspent energy. So you might want to play Valentina as early as possible to see what you're going to do with the pull. Magneto's just a good card. He's a 4/9 and he's doing his effect. That's good. Hulk is 4/9 stats, not too shabby, and Giganto is pretty good as well. 4/11 is a good ratio. So those are the guards that I deem as pretty good. And even then, some of them don't seem too thrilling. Now, do they? When we look at the situational ones, Arnim Zola is pretty garbage because he's always going to have -3 power unless you got Luke Cage out there. And then really, what are you copying and duplicating? You got to set up that board state for an Arnim Zola play, and you're probably not ready with a Valentina deck. So I don't love that. Null, again, destroy. You need that to happen. Leader, yeah, you copied their card, but then you put -1 power on the board. So that's actually less value than whatever your opponent's playing. You could probably play something else along with the leader, but I don't love that at all. Galactus just gets even more difficult to pull off. You can do it earlier, so maybe there's like a surprise opportunity, but 2-power threshold to be winning that location is not easy. You'd have to go like Valentina, Green Goblin, Galactus to like successfully pull that off on turn 4. And then I don't even know what you're doing after that. So that's tough. Hela needs things to be discarded. I think that's terrible. Possibly one of the worst ones with only 3 power return. Spectrum Onslaught have that ongoing problem where if you're playing ongoing, you've got ongoing cards. Yeah, they're going to be great. But we just don't know that yet. So not very reliant. Apocalypse as well, discard. I don't think Valentina is ever going to really work in discard. Unlikely anyways in the short term. So yeah, I don't think that's good at all as a pull. And then you got Ultron, which actually could have been up there. I could have probably swapped Blob and Ultron if I was being generous, because Ultron can at least fill up a location that we can't reach. Kind of got that Dr. Doom effect. So I think he could have been, a little bit higher, but man, drones are just so weak. Eliath, again, not too bad, but then the situation is that we require priority to get value out of Eliath. We can't guarantee that. So still a bit tricky. Heimdall, you can move things over and try and be tricky, but that's not all that great either. Living Tribunal, that's situational. Helicarrier, are we going to discard it or not? If we're not, 4/7, don't love it. I just don't love a 4. Like if we're playing a 4/7, our opponent's doing something else with an effect, game changing, they're better off. So like Thanos isn't that great. Agatha, that one's a big topic. First of all, okay, so Agatha can be generated by Valentina. This was confirmed by Glenn. Second of all, a lot of people are like, well, it's not that bad. She just plays herself on turn 4, and I would agree. But the problem that I see a lot of people making is everyone's just assuming you play Valentina on turn 2, which, don't get me wrong, that's a fantastic time to do it. And I would encourage you to do it. If you're lucky enough to draw her that early every single time, but it's just not guaranteed. There's going to be a lot of instances where you got to play Valentina on turn 4 or 5. And if you play Valentina on turn 5 and she generates Agatha, you do not have a final turn. So that is not good. That's why it's situational. okay? But if you play Valentina on turn 3 and you get Agatha for turn 4, she's going to play herself, you get an 11 power, that's great. So it's those ebbs and flows of like, depending on the situation at hand, that could be a good pull, or it could be game losing. Then the last two, Destroyer. I could have put Destroyer up there, but like, geez, if you're not protecting things and you want to play that later on, like you're destroying your whole board and that could be nasty. And then Infinite, same situation as Agatha. If it's turn 5, I generate Infinite and I have him in hand for turn 6. I can't skip turn 6 unless Limbo's out there. So it's just a dead card in my hand, most likely. That's why he's in the situational risky. Okay, so that's the 6 cost cards, but let's take a look at the mechanics for Valentina to understand her a little bit better. So I'm going to kind of breeze through this because I already talked about it, but you can pull Agatha. That was confirmed. -2 cost and the -3 power, they're modifiers. It's not permanent changes to these cards. So things like Titan will discount the cards generated from Valentina and Quinjet, right? So Quinjet, anything that was generated in your hand that didn't start there, great. Give that -1 discount, make them 3 costs. Titan on the board, discount 6 costs by 1. Yes, it will afflict those. They will get discounted further. Now, Kyra will also be able to protect the cards because they do read as 6 cost cards when they're on the board. So if you're worried about them getting destroyed by some crazy means, Kyra might be worth teching in. And like I said earlier, Zabu will not be able to discount cards generated by Valentina because he's looking for 4 cost cards and Valentina's cards are 6 costs. So some of the pros are the game-winning answers that I just highlighted. You can straight up win a game from that. But here's the biggest plus to this card that makes me very interested in her. You generate this card. Your opponent has no idea what you have, and they're going to be so worried that it's one of those game-winning options. That amount of, I don't know if you call it deception, that advantage, that fear you put into the opponents is more valuable than the card itself. Trust. It's like when you're playing against somebody on the raft, they get there first, they get that free card. When you're on that final turn, you're not just thinking about whatever strategy you have, but you're probably adding 10 power to a location if you can even predict it, because it's just like a 0 free 6 cost card that they have. Now, it might have been Arnim Zola, and maybe they're not better off for whatever they got from the raft, but you don't know. You don't know. That unpredictable advantage that your opponent now has over you is probably going to lead you to retreat, especially if they snap. They snap on that final turn, that you're probably going, well, they got the nuts. They got like an amazing card. They got Giganto or whatever. It's 14 power. And here I am just going to play my typical turn 6 play. It's not even going to compare. So I think that advantage is huge for this card. To add to that too, you don't have to play the generated card. I think a lot of people are going to get caught up in getting a discounted 6 cost card when really you could just leave in the hand and do some other shenanigans like Loki or Devil Dino and stuff like that, or just use that fear that you put into your opponents, play out the rest of your cards as you would, and they're going to be kind of trying to figure out how to get away from whatever card you may have potentially pulled. So while the randomness can scare your opponent, I'm putting it as a major con because it is random. We don't have agency over what Valentina is going to give us. And like I said, most of them are kind of situational. So it can be a fire pull or it could be terrible. So that RNG is going to lead her to probably being cut from a lot of lists just because it's not reliable what you're going to get. The randomness is a little bit too much in this instance, and she's not doing much otherwise. And lastly, it's a turn 2 play. So kind of playing back to what I was saying about like you play her on turn 5 and then turn 6 you want to do something. If you play Valentina on turn 6, you're just generating a card into your hand. You do need kind of a 2-turn setup to actually get the full value out of this card if you want. It's so interesting to me that really you're paying the same, but it's just a matter of when you can play the cards, right? Because Valentina is a 2-3. That's what you're taking away from the 6 cost card, and then a few synergies in between that help out a lot. But anyways, let's talk about some counters if you don't want to pick up this card. Well, Valentina has an on reveal, so Cosmo is here once again. Of course. But the better one I would wager is Mobius, because Mobius is going to make those discounted 6 cost cards cost 6, which is not good because they're going to retain their negative power. And then you got to really, I don't even know what pull could actually be worth it with that -3 power debuff. So yeah, Mobius is pretty nasty and a pretty good tech option in today's meta. Then you got Rogue. So the reason I put Rogue and Enchantress here, it probably looks a little weird because obviously Valentina does not have ongoing abilities. Well, it's mostly because the two best cards that, in my opinion, work with Valentina are both ongoing cards. And should they get shut down, it's going to be very disruptive to the Valentina player. Those two being, and spoiler alert, but Quinjet and Luke Cage. One way to further discount those 6-cost cards, and then one way to reduce the negative power that is being afflicted by Valentina. If you can shut those down with Enchantress, or even better yet, steal it with Rogue, well, that's going to kind of suck. It's either going to disrupt their curve or leave them with less power than they were actually expecting to have. Then I got Ronin. If they choose to not play the card, they are generating a card, so maybe they can't play all the cards in their hand. Well, Ronin's going to get even more powerful because obviously they have more cards. That's pretty nice. And then I got Sandman as the last one. I don't know about this one necessarily, but you kind of want to play as many cards as possible with Valentina, right? You want to get that 6 cost out there with a few other things potentially. If Sandman's out there and yeah, you got to play Sandman on turn 5 and it's turn 6, well, now you're just playing your 6 cost card anyways. Doesn't matter if it costs 4 or 6. It's just a 6 cost at this point. So it's more like Valentina generated a card and did nothing and actually hit it with -3 power. So yeah, Sandman's kind of annoying more than I think it's a direct counter. So that's what I got for the counters on this card. Let's check out some deck lists. Aside from those main 2 synergies that I talked about in Quinjet and Luke Cage, which I think are by far the 2 best synergies to be paired with this card, I think there's things like Wong, Odin, these sorts of generation on reveal triggers so that we can get multiple triggers out of Valentina, which seems really fun. You could even toss in Grandmaster, but he, that's a little bit dicey sometimes. Collector, getting those cards back into the hand, gets him buffs. Why not? Maybe that's a thing. And then Mockingbird is actually going to get a discount for each one of those 6 costs that we can play because they did not start in our deck. So when it comes to the decks, we got Agent 14, which funny enough, I was just doing a little bit of background on Valentina. She actually was Agent 14. So you got Agent 13. She was Agent 14 for a short period of time. And this is just a shield type deck with Loki. And I really think at the end of the day, like when I was trying to theory craft and deck build for this, it was tough. This card doesn't really fit in a whole lot, in my opinion. And the best home is a Loki deck. And I actually think she's going to be great there, which makes it tough purchase decision with this card. Because here's the deal. You get this card and you can play it. If it's one of those really highly synergistic cards, then fantastic. You get to play it. And if you choose not to, then you can use Loki to flip it to something else and it'll get discounted. And then we also got, synergies with Quinjet and Snowguard to get us a bunch of cards, Cable to get us some cards. I even put in the trio of Kitty Pryde, Angela, Elsa, because I think that just works really well with the Loki package. So it's just a mix of like card generation with discounts, playing a lot of cards and getting a lot of power out on the board and probably filling up the board pretty quickly. I also got Luke Cage in there. He's probably the most, substitutable card in this list. I was thinking about splashing in Devil Dino. I think would be a really fun option. But I just thought, let's get rid of that negative power affliction. And there's a lot of that going around in the meta right now. So it wouldn't hurt to just tech him in. Next one is Madam Hydra. This one seems like the most fun to me, and I haven't really refined it that well. I was thinking about adding Mystique or just finding a way to get more on reveals going, but I put in Magic instead to extend the game in case we do get a lot of those 6 drops. I kind of want to use one every single turn, and the idea is just like play Wong, use Valentina there, use Absorbing Man, use Odin, whatever we got to do with the Zabu, and we just make them, well, the 6 cost won't be cheaper, but at least our Shang-Chi, Absorbing Man, Wong might be cheaper so that we can play them into that combination. And then the idea is just to have a bunch of those 6 cost cards that are reduced with Quinjet, and we can play like 2 or 3 of them in turns 6 or 7, which would just be wild. I don't think this is going to be very good, but it seems like kind of a fun way to play this card. Oh, also I want to mention that I'm putting Quinjet in every single one of these decks because I just feel like that's necessary. I just feel like the pair are inseparable. It's just too good. Go from the any one of those situational risky cards that I was mentioning, pretty much any one of them. If they cost 3, it's hardly even situational. You just play it for value. So I do like that pair. And the last deck is 6 cost Frenzy. So this is more just a value deck where we kind of use Valentina to give us another 6 cost. So we can play that instead of Dr. Doom potentially, or just a way to fill out for Miss Marvel. So there's 2 cost as separately costing cards at her location so she can give us that power. And then you just got a bunch of benefits like Iron Lad, maybe hitting off of Valentina, giving us another option, or Captain Marvel to move around, Vision to move around. A lot of unpredictable power and where it's going to be. And I think that's the element of surprise that this deck brings, and that's kind of its strength. So there you go. Those are my deck lists. But is Valentina a snap or a pass? Valentina is a pass. I really thought this was going to be a snap when I first saw it, and as I kind of just looked at it a little bit more in detail, I've come to the conclusion that this is just not worth 6,000 tokens, and I think it's going to end up falling a little bit flat. But the problem being that I think it's going to be quite a fun card, and I'm having a really difficult time lately, saying to either purchase these or not purchase these, because cards are always changing, and at the end of the day, you got to just get the card that you think is going to be the most fun, not necessarily the most strong one, because the strong ones tend to be these big stat sticks like Call Obsidian or Mockingbird, etc. And if you just end up picking all those up, I think it just gets a little bit boring, maybe depends on your playstyle. Whereas cards like this have that element of RNG randomness that can be very exciting and very fun. When you're playing a game, you never know what's going to happen. So in the fun scale, I think this is actually a really great card to get, but I just don't think it's going to ultimately be all that strong or meta defining. And I don't think it's going to find a home outside of Loki decks. So unless you're in love with that archetype, this is a pretty easy pass. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about Valentina in the comments below. If there's anything I missed about this card, some synergies or combos that are just crazy and going to pop off, I would love to hear it. Let me know. All right. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and I will catch you guys next time.